Hey everybody, Wendy Sellers here, the HR lady. Welcome back to our podcast. JC is here with me too. Hey, JC.
Hey, Wendy Sellers, the HR lady. It's, when I go back in time and I think about meeting you, you were just Wendy, but after you trademarked your life, I got to call you the HR lady every time I see you now, by contract.
Those trademarks weren't cheap and they weren't free, so you're right. I am going to say the HR lady anytime I get it.
Is it on your driver's license that way? I got to ask you,
Actually, my car license has HR lady on it, which
Nice.
my neighbors picked out of. And I was like, whatever. They know who I am. If somebody throws an egg at me because of it, it is what it is. But maybe I'll get some clients driving around town. With that said, hey, we are here today to talk to an amazing guest, leadership co-pilot and founder, Pamela Moore. Hey, Pamela.
Hey, good to meet you guys. Thanks for having me.
Where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from Portland, Oregon. That's where I'm based. Yeah.
All right. So we got we got Oregon covered, New York, we got Florida. We're going to have to just jump somebody in. We just interviewed somebody in Canada. It looks like I'm going to have to, get the California somewhere coming in soon. Hey, tell us a little bit about your company and what you do, Compass Human Resources.
Well, I started Compass in 2006. So what's that, 18 years ago now? And it's evolved over the years. I started out doing more traditional types of HR consulting. And over the years, actually, I've moved away from the traditional HR stuff and have specialized a lot more. And I'm in the employee and leadership development realm now, all things talent management. So facilitation, instructional design, coaching, team effectiveness, whatever's going to help people get the best out of their employees.
I love it. Well, we're in a similar space. I also started out that way too, as HR consultant to small businesses, acting as their HR. And then since the pandemic, the desire and need, and finally companies saying, okay, we'll do this to train their managers and to train their employees. It finally came alive. And I'm like, oh, thank goodness. It's a shame it had to come out of a pandemic. And it really came out of, in my opinion, the fact that they were having difficulties attracting and retaining people. So they said, we need to do assessments. We need to do training. We need to do a coaching. I know that you're also certified with everything DISC, which I love. Learning everything DISC and learning my own style changed my entire life. I write about personality styles and then personality traits in my 2 books. And I know that you also do Hogan assessments, which we're getting into that as well. So let me just ask you this straight out, Pam. Explain how assessments can help individuals become self-aware and create actionable goals and personal accountability.
I think that, at least for me, and I love DISC. DISC is my jam, I have to say. I have just found that particularly if an organization chooses one that they like and they bring it in for lots of people, that it creates a common language for people to talk about certain things without it being so personal and without people feeling so vulnerable. And I think it's really important to have that common language so that people can connect and understand and talk about the things that are important to them. I also find that completing an assessment sort of validates the things that people know about themselves already and also surprises them with a few things that maybe they didn't know, right? So there's that sense of, well, I already knew I was good at this, but I don't blow my own horn about it. But now I took this assessment and it's almost okay for me to say, yeah, that's one of my strengths or that's something I'm really good at. Yeah. And it also, I think, works well with other tools, right? So I'm sure you don't use your tools in isolation either, right? It's really lovely to have an assessment and maybe a 360-degree feedback survey, and you can kind of look at those things together. So it starts creating this toolbox that people can build off of. And for me, that's really important, that it's not just my opinions when I'm working with somebody, right? That there's something external that's scientifically valid. I want to say that, like, don't do the fly by night, whatever you find on the internet assessment. I'm talking about something with some science behind it.
Yeah, something that's valid and reliable.
Yeah,
Yes.
I took a
Yes.
BuzzFeed test last night, and what I found out was, don't do that.
What kind of tree are you?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Like, no. Science is important, but having that just reinforces whatever the coach or the trainer is trying to do with people. And I think that that's very important in building that credibility when you're working with folks.
Speaking of credibility, according to the Harvard Business Review, 75% of employees who undergo regular self-assessments, they wind up reporting greater self-awareness and are more likely to set actionable goals. These assessments also lead to improved personal accountability, helping individuals track their progress, stay committed to their personal and professional development. Back to you.
Yeah, it really is. Going back to what Pam was saying about this, the data part, the science part. I'm a D personality, high D, off the charts D, in case you couldn't figure that out already, which stands for dominant and direct for our listeners. And that's what you are too, Sam, right?
Let's hear, I'm a DC, so D's in the house.
So you're like dominant, direct, and science, please, versus
Yes.
emotions. Emotions are important, but we have to make sure we're giving people actual facts and not fly by night assessments. It's so true though. Like, I know for me, the minute I ever do any kind of assessment, now I'm a lot more knowledgeable about these assessments, so I could usually tell where they're going. But I've tried tricking, I do DISC as a wholesaler as well. And I've tried tricking my own assessment because I know, I can answer this different. And it just keeps asking me more questions because it's like, Wendy, we know you're lying. And I'm
There's
like,
a
all right.
reason. There's
Yeah,
a reason they ask you the same question 4 different times,
It really does. So, talking about assessments, though, can these assessments, such as DISC or Hogan or 360, can they help managers, better manage a specific employee, and give us some, explanation on how and why?
Yeah, I think they're really important, especially if the manager's up for doing one as well, so they can share with their employees. I think it's not all on the manager, right? I think it's important for people to get to know their managers as well. But I always encourage people to share whatever they feel comfortable sharing with their manager, because, I'm going to come in, I'm going to be there for them, but I don't work beside them every day. Their manager does. Their manager is there. And so if somebody's going to set actionable goals, then their manager is going to be the one that's going to help support them as they're working toward those goals. And so it's important, I think, for managers to be there for that. I also think that, there's not a one size fits all management technique, right? Every single person is different. And the more that a manager knows about each individual employee, the better equipped they are to sort of tailor their management style and their management techniques to what that person needs to get to their goals. And so, again, I think assessments are great because it creates a common language. It creates consistency in the information that a manager may be getting about their team members. And if you can get the manager and the whole team to do it together, even better, right? Because then they're all on the same page, and it just creates a lot of great talking points and interactions. But even if just the employee does it and shares like their key findings and a couple things they feel like they want to work on, their manager is going to be better equipped to support them once they know that information.
Yeah, absolutely. Research from the Brandon Hall Group found that 69% of companies that use assessments for employee development did report better management and alignment of the entire workforce.
With that said, one thing I do want to remind our listeners, which you probably have heard me say before, is be careful of doing assessments to choose people for a job, or doing assessments to choose them, for a promotion or something like that. I'm not saying you can't do it, but there are definitely some concerns because it should only be a part of the decision-making process.
Right.
And so
No,
we
no,
don't
no.
have time.
I agree with you, and
Yeah.
I'm going to step on that because you should be promoting based off your favorites. You are exactly right.
Do not listen
No.
to him.
No, we shouldn't be doing that. Don't do that.
No.
But there's so many times, companies they'll be doing assessments of their candidates because I get it. You want to get to know people, but that it can only be a percentage of the decision-making factor. And let's face it, we're not going to get to know anybody, as a candidate just out of an interview. So we have to better prepare for the interview. That's a whole other conversation.
Right.
Before we jump into that a little bit more, I have a question because I saw that you also do the Hogan Assessment, which I do not, I'm not certified in that. I know about it, but explain what that is to our listeners.
Okay. So you're familiar with DISC, so I'll start with that. DISC is a bit more of a behavior-based assessment. And so that's good, but it can be affected by outside things and it might change over time as people develop. Where Hogan is a personality-based assessment, and that's probably not going to change over time. It's also gets underneath the behavior. So Hogan in particular, I like it because the reports that it generates are very user-friendly. They're very related to work. They have lots of really great sort of guidance in them. So once the coach is not in the room with you, you can still go back and look at that and understand what it's talking about and use the development stuff that's in there. The other thing I like about Hogan is that, similar to DISC, it is owned by an organization that has much, like 40 years or so of science behind it. And you have to be a certified coach in order to use it. So you get that consistency. You can talk to any Hogan certified consultant and you're going to hear the same stuff. And I think that's important. There are other personality assessments out there that I won't name here that are extremely inconsistent because they're not regulated. And so again, that's my D coming out. I like the consistency. I like the science, but also I think it's great for much higher level employees. So let's be honest, Hogan's expensive. And so for small businesses or frontline employees and first-time leaders, people who are not as advanced in their career, I wouldn't use Hogan with them. But when you get up higher, mid-level, director, C-suite, then you're talking about people who've probably done a lot of assessments. They probably have the foundation stuff. They need to go deeper. And so what Hogan brings in is several different things. They have broken the assessment up into, I call them modules. They probably call them something else, but it looks at the bright side, which is your strengths. It looks at the dark side, which can be strengths, but the things that might get you into trouble. And then it looks at the inside. And that's the point. That's the part that I find extremely valuable is it talks about your values. It talks about your motivators. It talks about why you behave the way you do, why you make the decisions you do. And that's been really transformative for executive level people when they're looking at their next adventure or even just how do I go beyond where I'm at? They've done a lot of stuff. It's much more under the surface. It's much more complex when they start talking about career development. So I use the Hogan for usually directors and above is where I use Hogan because it's very complex, but I love it because it gets to the why and not a lot of other assessments really get to that underneath part.
Good advice there.
Yeah, a study by Hogan Assessments revealed that 75% of Fortune 500 companies use the Hogan Assessment to enhance leadership development, employee selection, and talent management. Back to you.
So thank you, Pam, for that advice of the difference in the assessments. Now, what other main piece of advice today do you have for managers, HR, or small business owners moving forward? And then also, how can people connect with you?
Advice-wise, I think if we're talking about assessments and things like that, you mentioned something, Wendy, about, using these things for selection. And if I'm advising on that, I actually it's my personal preference not to use assessments for selection, especially a work style one. If you're going to use one, use a personality based one, but use them as a coaching tool as during the onboarding process. I think bringing in an assessment, bringing in some kind of professional development tool to help them integrate during the onboarding process can be, I don't even know the word. Transformative, I think is the word I'm looking for, in helping get people off the ground, and also just showing that you care about their success as they're coming in the door with your organization. And so, pick the assessment that works based on the role and the experience of the person involved. But they're fantastic onboarding tools, is what I
agree with you too. I would not use it for selection, and I would be very, very cautious to give anybody that advice. There's like a 33% rule. That's a whole other conversation, but thank you for that. I 100% agree with you. So how can people find you if they want to learn more about getting an assessment for themselves or for their entire team?
Jump on, there's a contact form on my website, and it's easy. It's compasshumanresources.com. Spell it out. You can get to me through LinkedIn as Pamela J. Moore. And my email address is pam@compasshumanresources.com. Whatever works for you. I am happy to chat with you about assessments, talent development, whatever.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Before we wrap up here, I wanted to brag a little bit about my co-host here in case those folks that are listening don't know. He has an amazing podcast. You can find it on Instagram, Facebook. It is called Interesting Things with JC. Most episodes are 2 to 5 minutes long. And JC, as of today, he won an award for this podcast, the Davey Award. So congratulations, JC. Tell us a little bit about this award.
Yeah, greatly appreciate, Wendy. And you're making me blush a little bit. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, the panel of judges for the 2024 Gold Award for Educational Podcast Series stepped up and bestowed the honor upon me. I found out at midnight. I set the alarm at 11:59 so I could wake up in time just to check the website and make sure it was real, and it was. And it's an honor to truly be recognized alongside so many distinguished professionals. When we think about the opportunities to take a look at our work, these awards, like the Davey Awards, they might not be named like an Oscar or anything like that, but it is their 20th year. The Davey Awards, they are for smaller companies, but the judges have huge reputations. And the Davey is sanctioned and judged by the Academy of Interactive and Visual Arts. Some of the members are from organizations like Condé Nast, Disney, GE, Keller Crescent, Microsoft, Monster.com, MTV, and so many more. Plethora of people were submitted and nominated, and kudos to everyone that did walk away, let it be with silver or gold. And in this particular instance, I feel very honored to accept that gold award for Interesting Things with JC. It's been 1,078 consecutive days doing the podcast, releasing one every single day. They are educational. They are royalty-free, all except for one episode, but that's an interesting story for another time. Yeah.
They're so cool. I've learned so much from your, Interesting Things with JC podcast. The most random things didn't think I ever wanted to learn in life. I'm like sitting there, oh my God, I just listened to this and now I'm looking up everything. So kudos to you. Congratulations on the 2024 Gold Award for Educational Podcast Series.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam, so much for being here today. And thank you, everybody, for listening. We hope this information has been helpful. Thanks for joining us. Take care.